Rise of Chinese public diplomacy during COVID-19 era. Diplomacy is defined as method of manipulating behavior and decisions of foreign administrations and peoples by the means of dialogue and negotiations. Public diplomacy is one of major diplomacy type. Public diplomacy is defined as efforts backed by the government for communicating with the foreign publics. It is also known as people's diplomacy. Various means of public diplomacy are the statements of the decision makers, focused campaigns directed by the government organizations, and the efforts to influence the international media to represent the official policies towards the international audiences in a positive manner. Soft power is termed as the ability of state to influence the other state and non-state actors through appeal and attraction. COVID-19 is called as coronavirus disease 19. In this competing world era, every nation seeks to get dominancy and prominence. So, China's main aim of public diplomacy is to fight against hegemonism, imperialism, colonialism, to strengthen the unity with other countries, to back the developing nations to protect their independence, and to strengthen the national economies, and also makes attempt to safeguard the world peace. In order to fulfill its objectives, China is observed to be actively engaging and handling the foreign affairs. Moreover, public diplomacy of China is aimed at rebuilding the image of nation. Even before the pandemic emerged out, China implemented its public diplomacy in Africa for its economic as well as geopolitical interests. China adopted coronavirus and mask diplomacy as a tool of public diplomacy towards other nations. COVID-19 opens the success doors for China and provides an opportunity to China to gain dominancy in world Chinese administration, forgetting the hegemony. Under the rule of President Xi, China plays a significant role in providing aids to the developing nations for achieving dominancy. China's efforts of combating with this pandemic and the steps being taken by China to provide aids and assistance to developing nations like African nation helps China to get dominancy at international level. This all presents China as global leader during COVID-19 era, when it plays a significant role in helping the others. China, Zhonghua, Chenghua, Zhongguo and Chengkuo, officially named as People's Republic of China, PRC, is largest East Asian country. It holds largest world's population, occupying near to 1/14 of Earth's land surface. Beijing is its capital. Shanghai is its main industrial part, and Hong Kong is foremost port and commercial sector. During earlier world stages time period, China flourished culturally and economically. It is bounded to north by Mongolia, to northeast by Russia and North Korea, to east by East China and Yellow Sea, to southeast by South China Sea, to south by Nepal, India, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar and Bhutan, to southwest by Pakistan, to west by Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan. COVID-19 is called as coronavirus disease 19. In March 2020, World Health Organization, WHO, declared coronavirus disease as pandemic because this is the disease affects not only one country but it prevailed all over the world. Coronavirus pandemic is the name of disease which is spreading throughout the world and causing great fear in people all over the world. The first case of pandemic was reported from Wuhan in China. After its first case in Wuhan, pandemic have been detected in many countries of the world. It spreads when you come in contact with someone who is already suffering from this virus. Because of COVID-19, daily lives have been changed. Economy of many countries has been slowing down. At the present time there are no proper vaccines and treatment for curing this disease, although the national governments, World Health Organization, WHO, and partners are working in coordination to control the increasing spread. of this disease. Chinese very first report of public diplomacy highlights that public diplomacy denotes ways of promoting bilateral discussions with surrounding nations outside state level. China pursues to move from representation of China threat to positive image of China as peace-loving and friendly nation. Starting points of Chinese public diplomacy are identified into three major attempts. First attempt was observed in mid-1930s when foreign journalists visits China. Second attempt was observed in early 1970s when China initiated it, ping-pong diplomacy. At that time leader of China initiated open door policy. As a result of this policy, foreign businessmen flowed investments which in turn modernize up China. Last attempt was observed in 1989 when China broke the concept of isolation and appointed major public relation firm. Aims of Chinese public diplomacy to promote Chinese culture, to promote Chinese language, to make clear China's positive image, to enhance international trade and friendly association with other nations, to back the developing nations' tools and examples of Chinese public diplomacy as 3/4 of world population is accounted by the Africa, Asia and Latin America. Keeping this in mind, China considered its prior international duty to support these developing nations. China backed the developing nations whenever these nations face external interference or any other natural calamities. In order to fulfill its objectives, China is observed to be actively engaging in handling the foreign affairs. Media, publications, internet and events are the instruments of China's public diplomacy. The conduction of major and smaller events by China, like introduction of Asian Games and UN International Women's Conference in 1990, serves as vital instrument of Chinese public diplomacy. These events were carried out for promoting Chinese culture along with international trade. Main aim behind it is to promote friendly association with the other nations and to enhance the understanding of Chinese language. At international broadcasting, China's Central Television, CCTV, broadcasts internationally on radio, television in Russian, English, Spanish, Arabic and Chinese language for promoting Chinese language. Under the rule of Hu Jintao, Confucius Institute was established. Aim of this institute was to promote the Chinese language abroad and to interaction between Chinese and foreigners. In 2004, Confucius Institute was established in Korea. At the last of 2016, China gets success in establishing 512 institutes in above 140 world countries. Chinese Bridge is considered to be perfect example of public diplomacy. The language organization not only encourages the foreign students to learn Chinese language, but in addition it also encouraged the foreign students to visit China. For promoting Chinese culture, China actively engaged in establishing cultural centers in other nations. Very first cultural center of China was established in 1988 in Mauritius and Benin. In addition to these, above 20 cultural centers were established in Africa, Asia and Europe. Chinese public diplomatic efforts dates back to the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic. China is seen in providing assistance to developing and weaker nations even before. Chinese focus in African continent is highlighted through the evolving economic opportunities in African continent. China has been observed in providing aid and loans to Africa. Public diplomacy of China in Africa was seen from the education opportunities given to African students to study in China. Medical and technological aids given to African nation from 1960s to 1970s. 2008 financial crises paved the way for China towards strategic opportunities, as during 2013 China announced One Belt, One Road initiative. This initiative increased China's investments in projects in Global South, In COVID-19 era, China passion towards represents its nation as generous. As first case of coronavirus took out its root from Wuhan, so, keeping this in view, China adopts defensive approach. Chinese government have taken certain measures like transport closure, closing of educational institutions and shops. It should be noted that public diplomacy contains both external and internal dimensions. Like China provides measures for combating the diseases to its own citizens and also to the other nations. This novel pandemic not only results into loss of human lives, but it's also resulting into global economic decline. European Union, United Kingdom, Australia, Germany and other nations demanded from China about more clearness regarding to China that how to deal with this pandemic and to get rid from its devastating effects. China provided medical aids, along with significant health equipments to the developing and weaker nations. Chinese public diplomacy is visible from this that during this pandemic time period China also shared its expertise in dealing with this pandemic. Moreover, China provided medical aids like ventilators, intensive care unit, ICU, gloves, masks, medicines, testing kits and ultrasound equipments to other nations for dealing with coronavirus. In addition to these, Chinese government sends its medical experts for giving the trainings to the other countries. China also provides loans to other nations like Sri Lanka to fight against coronavirus. These all measures play a significant role in representing positive image of China and its efforts and its public diplomacy towards other nations. During coronavirus, Chinese public diplomatic efforts paves the way for representing China as powerful state in the world. Further efforts which were taken by China in fighting this novel pandemic was that in addition to Chinese administrations, the Chinese companies also takes it part in helping the world, like Alibaba Foundation and Jack Ma Foundation. These foundations donate medical aids to rest of world. Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo and other companies also takes part in combating this pandemic by providing masks to the European countries. This all is about Chinese public diplomacy during pandemic time period. Under the public diplomacy, new forms of diplomacy emerges like coronavirus diplomacy. Key point of this diplomacy is that COVID-19 serve as a base to maintain peaceful relations between the states which was hostile before, like the case of China and Italy. These two states are hostile before the pandemic era, but during this pandemic era China provides medical aids to Italy for combating the disease. Mask diplomacy, it focuses upon the medical aids given by the countries to the other nations for combating the disease. Like during this pandemic time period, China provides medical equipments to the developing nations and itself received the equipments from Japan. Another vital factor which plays a significant role in improving positive image of China at international level was the speeches made by the politicians of other nations in favor of China. Examples could be seen from the President of Serbia and Foreign Minister of Italy, who claimed that they didn't receive any assistance from European during time period of pandemic. They stated that it was only China who gives them assistance in time of need. This all represents China as a most responsible and powerful state who helps the other, even though itself suffering from the devastating effects of this pandemic. This all paves the way for China for future cooperations and also trade with the rest of world. Through public diplomacy, China turned the health crises into opportunities. This all paves the way for getting positive image in the world, which is the desire of every nation in this competing world. Chinese public diplomacy. Success or failure. Public diplomacy of China is considered to be a success. The reason behind is that China achieved its success in a way that during this pandemic China seems the one who shows itself as a powerful in helping other nations.